Cool. So this is a chance for us to sync up and where we are with the Kubernetes migration. For me, this will be a little bit of kind of catching up with what you've done. So hopefully it'll be useful for you to also just review like exactly what we're trying to get out of this, but then may need to work out like what makes sense to pick up next. So my understanding is the overall goal is to migrate GitLab.com onto Kubernetes. And the main benefit of this is we get to use the kind of Kubernetes style release capabilities. Is there anything else that is kind of worth calling out around that stuff?
I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
You know, I think there are there's the issue of the migration, and then there's also like the tooling improvements around dealing with our Kubernetes deployments. Both those, I think on the tooling side, we're doing pretty well right now. On the monitoring side, I think we could be doing better with our dashboards and things like that. I added a comment in the agenda about that. But other than that, I think, yeah, I mean, we could just focus on the next steps for migration and kind of focus on the areas where we're unblocked. Because I think for some of the fleet types, we're completely blocked until we see changes, improvements in the application.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense then. Cool. So I've dropped in where it's kind of some of the epics. So we've got the epic 89, and thanks for adding some comments in this job. So remove NFS dependency for block. Do you just explain a little bit the
yeah, sure. So this status of this hasn't changed. It's been blocked for a while now. This epic specifically is about unmounting the shared NFS server. We actually have two NFS servers, one for what we call shared storage. It essentially is just storage that's shared between the front end and the back end. And it's sort of a catch-all storage for shared storage. The other is Pages, and Pages is used for the back-end storage for the Pages fleet. That is also mounted everywhere. The NFS, this particular epic is focusing on the shared NFS mount and is blocked on two issues. One of them is traces, and the other is this caching layer that we use for artifacts. That one I think will probably resolve easier than the traces one. The traces one, there's some discussion about how to make that a bit more performant. It sounds like that we're not sure how that's going to happen. Possibly creating a dedicated Redis, a dedicated Redis server for this. I don't know where it's going to end up, but I don't expect this to be resolved soon. I would say like probably no sooner than the next two releases, but we'll see. So that's kind of where we are now. And what this does is it blocks us on some queues that depend on the NFS. So we've been focusing right now on identifying the queues that depend on NFS and doing our best to quarantine them, which is, I mentioned here, like, I think for the urgent other shard, which is one of the two not urgent CPU bound shard, which is one of the two remaining shards that are left, we can probably start on that one very soon because we believe there's only one queue that depends on NFS.
Okay, great. Nice. Okay, cool. And is there anything that we need to do to try and move along those blockers, or are they sort of ticking along themselves?
I don't think there's anything much we can do. I know that they have pretty high visibility. And everyone, well, I assume everyone is well aware of these two blockers because they haven't changed. So I don't know if there's anything more we can do for that.
Okay, great. And then migrate urgent other shards complete, which is great. Okay, so sort of the question I had around the listed as not started. So the migrate urgent CPU bound shard and the migrate capsule shard, neither of those has an epic at the moment, as far as I could tell, unless they just weren't linked.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes ago, you're right.
Oh,
But I just created one because I
great.
knew you were going to ask. I just created one for urgent CPU bound. It doesn't have issues associated yet, but it'll probably follow the same, you know, issue,
Okay.
the same issues for the previous shards. I put on item number 4 in the agenda. If you click on that urgent CPU bound link, that's the epic. But I haven't added the issues for it. I think this one makes the most sense to get going on. Sean's been helping out with this, and it sounds like that there's only a single queue. So we need to move that queue off of the shard, and then we'll be able to tell if there are any more NFS dependencies for the queues that are running in the shard. And if not, I think we can go ahead and move forward with the migration. I don't know if Jason is listening in, but I did open up a charts issue for being able to set the HPA configuration for each shard separately. And this is something that came up during Urgent Others. Scarbeck will remember that we were kind of messing around with this. I'd like to get that completed before we do the next migration. And I think that's something that we can just pick up because we can just submit an MR to charts to do this. I think that's it. I think like with urgent CPU bound, I think we're pretty much ready to kind of get going on it. Scarbeck, do you have any comments on that?
I do not know. I haven't touched Kubernetes work for the last like 3 or 4 weeks. So like you're well.
What have you been
ahead.
doing, man? Yeah.
Release management work and the tiny little stuff from here and there.
Yeah.
And I am actively listening. So
thanks, Jason.
yeah, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Just got to roll it in.
Cool. Okay. I wanted to just touch base to ask if you think, before I do the code changes, I want to make sure that, like, as the maintainer, you're going to accept them. So if you think it's a good idea, I will go ahead and submit an MR for that. While I have your ear, the other kind of blocking issue is this dependency proxy issue, which is 4B1 in the agenda. And I guess you're not on the agenda, so you can't see it. But this is support for the dependency proxy in charts is still outstanding, and we have a queue that is for dependency proxy. So we'll need to get that done eventually. And I think this may be scheduled for the next release or two. Take a look.
Okay, if that's the case, we might be able to squeeze it in on this one at a production request, but more than likely it's going to end at 13.3.
It's currently set for, Larissa commented 13.3, so that's probably okay.
Yeah, if
Cool.
you're all right with standing with that, then that's fine. What you can do is make sure that it's got a production request flag on it.
Do you prefer production blocker or production request?
Well, since you're not blocked on actually making the migration right now, it does, like we have issues that they need to be done in this milestone or very early in the next, because we're blocking you from actually achieving your OKR endpoint. Whereas a production request is, we're going to need this soon. It's kind of like a priority flag for us when it comes to what production needs now versus what they'll need soon.
Okay, cool. I think that's pretty much it for our chart dependencies for Sidekick. Yeah, that's it for Sidekick. And then I mentioned, for completeness, I mentioned the blocking issues for the Git and WebSockets fleet, as well as the web and API. For Git and WebSockets, the blocking issues there, we have the charts issue for supporting the separate database endpoint for Sidekick and web service. I think, Jason, you're familiar with this one. This one is assigned to you and has a milestone of 13.2. I don't know. I guess, Jason, you're not looking at the agenda, so it's okay.
I am not, unfortunately.
Yeah, but are you familiar with this issue? It's configure unique database endpoints for Sidekick and non-Sidekick servers.
Yes, that is actually, that's on my list. assigned to me,
Okay,
and will soon be marked as in dev because I'm starting that work this week.
cool. So 13.2 is reasonable for that. Good.
It's not just reasonable, you may have it sooner than the end. So
Nice. Great. Okay, I promise that is all we have for charts stuff, so you can go back to brushing your teeth or whatever.
nope, just having my coffee downstairs. That's all.
Cool, thanks, man. So yeah, then we have the other thing that we need to finish up is the console agent support in the cluster so that we can get the database replica endpoint, and that needs to get done. I started on this and I wasn't blocked or anything. I just put it on the back burner. I think we can just pick this up again and soon. And then web API is the last one, and the TLDR of that one is like we're completely blocked until we fix pages and the shared NFS. There's really no way around it. Both the web and the API fleet must have the pages NFS mount. And until pages supports object storage, that's just completely blocked. Whew. Okay, that's pretty much it.
I can interject on the pages thing.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree that pages needs to have object storage, and we should not need NFS for all of these things. What I will inject is you have done this in some degree already on the sidekicks, and technically there is kind of a way to use the extra volumes behavior to inject a dedicated NFS just for the pages file system. I'm not saying I love it. I'm saying it may be a way to unblock pending further updates from that team.
Yeah, I think like we all agree, you know how it is. Like I prefer not to even float that option because we need to get pages fixed, and if this helps to get it fixed sooner, and then I don't want to go down that road if we can. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
Perfectly fine. I wanted, like I said, I just wanted to float there may be a stopgap issue if absolutely required. And
Yes.
It's one of those scenarios where, oh no, I'm with you. I've been beating this drum since Crete.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Cool. Scarbeck, any comments about those two items?
No.
No, you're good? Okay, so and then I have some other issues, and here maybe you have some suggestions on other things that we should be looking at. I just put the ones that, I went through all of the Kubernetes labeled issues yesterday and just pulled these out as ones that I think like we may want to work on. What do you think?
It just gives a sort of brief run through of each of the over, like a high level of each one.
Mm-hmm. These other issues, this is just like, yeah, so these are, yeah, so the first one, add cluster logging visibility. The logs from our Kubernetes cluster are not going to Elasticsearch. They're only going to Stackdriver. And this kind of sucks. I mean, like we typically use Elasticsearch for all of our logging. Going to Stackdriver is a pain. And also only a select number of people can do this. I think only SREs right now can do it, so it's not that great. Grafana annotation for deployments. Actually, I don't know how important this is, Scarbeck. Like,
Yeah, it's a nice to have. I don't think it's a priority.
Because we have Grafana annotations for the application deployments, because but not just for configuration and chart version bumps.
This is where that one becomes more important. It's just configuration changes to the cluster or applications in the cluster.
Adding more traffic to registry canary. This is one that I would like to do. Amy, the way that, so we have what is called the canary stage and the main stage. The canary stage is a subset of virtual machines that service requests that have a cookie set in your browser that says GitLab canary equals true, or certain request paths. So if you go to GitLab or GitLab.com, like infrastructure, you're going to automatically be routed to this subset of VMs. We do this at HA Proxy. Currently, the registry service is also using this request-based routing because the registry doesn't have cookies since it's not HTTP, like in your browser. So when you do a Docker pull or a Docker push, if the path matches a certain regex, then we route it to this canary namespace in our Kubernetes cluster. Currently, it receives very little traffic, and we've talked about just starting to use a percentage of traffic instead of these hard-coded paths. So that's the upshot of that issue, something that I think we should do, but maybe not super urgent. And then enabling auto-scaling for urgent other. This is when we finished the urgent other sidekick shard migration, we decided to not use the horizontal pod autoscaling HBA. And this was a decision we made because of the spikiness of the workloads in that queue group, where we would suddenly we'd be running steady at 100 jobs per second, and then we would spike up to 2,000 jobs. And this caused the HBA to scale up the number of pods, which then caused huge problems on our node pool because it would saturate the CPU and everything would degrade. So what we decided to do was just cap the number of pods, set the minimum and the maximum to the same number. And that meant that we had a very little backlog, but we would just work through it quickly and then we would continue on. Since then, this misbehaving queue has been moved off of the shard. So we wanted to reevaluate something we've discussing with Marin to reevaluate turning on auto scaling again. And also with setting HBA per shard, which is the earlier charts issue, I think we can probably reevaluate this. General improvement to dashboarding for K8s, the dashboarding for Kubernetes sucks right now, and I think you don't have an issue to improve it, but probably should, and maybe we can improve it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Scarbeck, any? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, then the only one I added, I'm not sure if there is an issue, but last week we had a couple of calls with Graham and Craig about kind of security. I wasn't sure whether anything came up from that we sort of either we should be doing or can do.
Yeah, I have a to-do to create an epic for the boring solution proposal to create per user VMs for accessing kubectl. So yeah, that you're right. That should probably be on the list, but we don't have an epic or issue yet for that.
Okay, I feel like that's going to be a larger project. I don't know how long that's going to take to complete.
I know, and I think to do it, we may want to pair up with reliability for it. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, but I'll take that. I have that to do that. So yeah, we can have that.
Can I interject on that one?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I apologize, I wasn't there. Why go the route of full-blown VM separation versus doing sharded shroot configuration on a single bastion?
Yeah, that's an option. One is that VMs are cheap, and I think from a security perspective, it's probably better since shroot is not really meant to be secure. The idea is to prevent SREs from accessing each other's credentials.
Oh, forgive me. Let me give you not just plain shroot on SSH. I'm talking slightly more controlled. We're familiar with and have access to a number of operating systems that support nspawn. Nspawn has full namespacing patterns, so you can actually fully jail the entire process set out.
Yeah.
As opposed to just a shroot, which point you can kind of escape.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an option. I guess you're thinking that to save money, right?
It's not necessarily just money. It seems like it's just resource
complexity.
Waste.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're looking at. We were looking at, for a first iteration, the most boring thing possible, which would be just to leverage existing Terraform, existing Chef, separate VMs. But I'm not super convinced, and I would agree with you. There are probably better ways to go about it. So I don't know. It's kind of Yeah, I mean, we're really not happy with anything right now, but this was sort of where we landed. I would say
Right.
there's not
I
universal
can't argue
agreement
with a
either.
boring solution, to be honest. That's fine.
Well,
I'm just like, was it evaluated?
I think no, that specifically wasn't. We're also talking about probably fewer than, well, I don't know, how many SREs are there, Scarbeck, these
Like
days?
18, a little less
18?
than 18.
I was going to say, like, there are fewer than 10. Is that many?
No, there's more than 10.
Really? Wow. Okay. Well, anyway, I was thinking the scale was a little bit smaller, but maybe it isn't. I don't know. This we need to flesh it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it sounds like a good one to have an epic and have a discussion. There's a lot of opinions to this one. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Anyway, yeah.
Scarbeck, was there anything that came out from having been release manager for a few months? Was there anything that either been missing from this list or perhaps has a different priority in your view?
Nothing comes out of release management related to Kubernetes.
Kubernetes has been so nice, right?
Yeah.
Like super easy.
Like if anything,
releasing.
Kubernetes has made the release management process super easy. Like, I mean, I'm being serious though. Like, take for example, deployments happen in Kubernetes within 10 minutes, whereas
Yeah.
deploying to the same fleet of servers takes over 30. So there's stuff like that. I think if anything, there's just general tooling improvements that we could do. But like, you know, Jarv highlighted the primary ones here. I'd have to do the same thing that Jarv did, is go through our backlog and determine, you know, what are stuff that, you know, would be interesting to work on and such. So I don't have any preference as to what we primarily work on. If we want to start exploring other things outside of our application, we could start maybe looking at that stuff. Jarv and I spoke to each other at one point, and I was thinking we could potentially move over PG Bouncer, you know, because that's supposedly a stateless application service that, you know, everything connects to, that, you know, should be easy to migrate over and stuff like that. But like, I think I'd rather concentrate on what we've currently set as priority right now.
A couple things I can think of, like one is the Helm Autodeploy. Like that, something we could pick up again. And another thing I noticed today was that we had a pages outage, or at least like we were getting 502s on pages, and that actually stopped our Kubernetes deploy, since we still depend on GitLab pages for charts. But I don't know, that's like lower priority, right?
Lower priority, but if it's going to be a blocker, we really need to address it. We've got the backup mechanism in place, but I guess something needs to tell Helm to use the backup mechanism.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that our team wants to investigate further is using OCI Registry for that. The support is coming along much better in 3.2 plus of Helm itself. And we as a product really need to dig into that and how we would tie a Helm registry into our existing OCI compliant container registry, because they basically work the same way. It's just a manifest difference. So being able to do that, get us away from pages, still has our resilience in the backing storage, but also gives us the fleet resiliency of running it behind the registry itself.
Yeah, that would be good. Do you think that's going to happen before we would like use pages on dev?
At the rate NFS changes are happening? Yeah.
Okay, just curious. And we wouldn't use like GitHub pages, right?
I would say probably not. I mean, we're more likely to use AWS Lambda before we use GitHub pages, I should say.
Oh, no Knative?
Okay, it sounds good. All right, so, but I don't know, but the Helm Autodeploy, I was semi-serious about that. Maybe we have an issue for that, right?
I don't know.
Okay, maybe that's something we can.
I guess one other thing that comes to mind is maybe we need to have an issue for this, is the discussion of having an automated rollback procedure right now, because right now Helm automatically rolls back if there's an issue, and that's been slightly problematic. I know Graham is not enthused by the fact that we utilize that option right now. And
Yeah.
also, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was
you
going
go
to
ahead.
say, like I at first I really liked the auto rollback, and now I do not like it because it's caused some surprises, and it makes you a little bit lazy because you see the rollback and you're like, okay, everything's fine. I'll take my time and fix the problem. But while you're fixing it, someone else merges something and then it breaks again.
So maybe we could improve the auto rollback to automatically remove your merge request.
Yeah, that would
Because
be
otherwise, if it doesn't automatically roll back, Helm is just going to sit there until the next deploy is successful. So we're going to have some thrashing pods constantly trying to start up over and over again. And while that's kind of low on the performance hog scale, it is kind of worrisome that we're going to have something screwing with our metrics, because we're going to have two deployments of, say, Sidekick attempting to run. One will be running and one will be attempting to run at the same time, and that's going to make our metrics look a little weird.
Yeah.
I know we have an issue for this somewhere, but if there are issues with Helm, we have poor visibility into it during the CI job. Currently, we have to really dig into our metrics, or we have to be on the cluster looking at why a pod is failing for X reason. There's nothing in our CI logs that says, hey, we're rolling back because we failed because of this specific thing caused the problem. It would be nice if we could improve that somehow, and I just literally have no idea what to do with that. I feel like that's an improvement that Helm needs to make for us.
Yeah.
Do we have visibility of when it happens?
Oh yeah, like we've got the necessary pod logs, so we could look at why a pod failed to start. And we, of course, have the timing data, so we could look at the right timing which all that happens. It's just, it's difficult to, there's a lot of work involved to troubleshoot it is all. So if we can make that more seamless, that would be a huge nice to have.
Right. Should we be prioritizing some of this stuff before we migrate more things? Like what's the kind of risk level?
I see no reason why we can't parallelize some of this work.
Yeah, I agree. I think like as far as the next shard for Sidekick, we can definitely work on this stuff in parallel. I don't think any of these other issues, we don't really have any, from where I stand, we don't have any P2, P1 issues. Or if we do, they're being worked on. So nothing would prevent us from doing things in parallel.
Okay, makes sense. So next step then will be to enable, to do the sort of issue 2172 to enable the
Urgent other.
The HBA config, yeah, because I think this is probably, I mean, we can work on some things in parallel, but yeah, I think getting that done and also laying the groundwork for the urgent CPU bound migration, which is just like creating the node pool in Terraform, doing the analysis for how we want to spec it initially, and then later finding out that we spec'd it completely wrong, and then changing it 10 times. Like, no, it's not going to be that bad, but it seems like what happens.
Yeah. And how about this, the enable auto scaling for urgent other? Is that something that we should work out and get in place before we move other shards? Like, I'm assuming everything else will also need to have this.
Yeah, well,
I think that's something else we could do in parallel with all this.
Yeah. So we're not running with auto scaling right now for urgent other, and it's going along just fine. One of the lessons I think we learned from that migration was that we probably shouldn't have enabled HPA from the get-go. We probably should have taken the more conservative approach and over-provisioned and turning off auto scaling and then introduce auto scaling. For the other shards, we do have auto scaling enabled, and we actually do scale up and down between like peak and non-peak. I don't know if we're doing the scaling very efficiently but it's happening, and it seems to roughly correlate with like peak traffic. You know, like it looks decent, but the fact is that what's our sidekick boot time right now, Scarbeck? Is it
Jay Plum
like,
might have some good answers for us because I think it's
I know
below a
he,
minute at this moment, but soon,
no
if
way,
not
I don't
already,
believe
we
it.
should have something that should bring it down to less than 30 seconds.
Really?
I can't remember if
So
that's made into production yet or not, Jason.
if it hasn't made it into production, I'd be surprised because it made it into the release.
We
Ah,
just bumped charts to the tip of master like that today. So yeah,
Yeah.
we can probably measure it now then to see what it looks like.
Yeah, we merged the fix inside of the CNG,
Yeah.
not necessarily in the charts themselves, because it's underlying process behavior,
Oh,
not
right.
configuration
Yeah.
management. So as
Yes.
long as you've been running master from about 5 days ago, off of that, or off of a auto deploy branch that had it, and I made sure that that MR was set with picking the auto deploy, you should have this functionality. This greatly increases the speed of the dependencies container. It reduces the CPU load, reduces the IO load, so that god awful contention when Sidekick is churning is not there anymore. But you still have to wait for, once the dependencies are good, the actual Rails process has to start. And yeah, it's still expensive, but it's no longer let's spawn 10 of them and watch them just burn an entire node until they finally get ready and start.
I'm just gonna kill a pod in staging and see what happens.
Works for me.
while you're demoing, Amy, I added a few items to the other issues. It's been a long time desire for both the distribution team as well as delivery to see if we could scale based on metrics instead of our current method of scaling, which is based on CPU utilization. And there's an issue somewhere for that. I don't know where it is. And then Alessio recently created an issue to discuss what we could do to make deployments. I'm failing to pick the right adjective for this, but separating out our canary and main stage deployments to different clusters to allow for better testing of Kubernetes cluster or configuration changes and better potential deployment methods. And I linked the issue that he created there. But that's going to be a larger, much larger project in the deep dark future, I think.
Right. Okay. And in terms of, is there like a smallish piece of the scaling by metrics that we could do, or do we still need to break that down further?
We definitely need to break that down, mostly because the way custom metrics patterns work inside of Kubernetes often require some extra implementation that's not natively supported. So there's a number of things we'll have to do, and we do have an issue over on the charts trying to figure out how we can do that and what's required to make it actually function. So that's probably going to be an epic that's going to span at least 2 milestones.
Right. Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Cool. Thanks for sharing that stuff, Scarbeck.
Jarv, if you scroll up to where it lists the individual containers, we should be able to see the start times for the individual components here.
Right. So
the dependencies container is the one that we've primarily been concentrating on recently, but that's the work that Jason's been concentrating on to help us out. So it started 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It ran for only 5 seconds, which is fantastic.
Amazing.
Yeah,
something sub 5.5, that because it rounds to the whole second.
that's it. This is like we went from like 3 minutes to now way under a minute. So that's really nice.
And I'm really happy to see that level of difference here, because if you look at the youngest pod that you have there, I think you saw it at 57 seconds. If you scroll up a ways from your terminal, when it finally showed up, it showed up as the youngest one at 57 seconds old. and running. So
Yeah,
it
I
was
did.
up
Yeah, I did.
and
Yeah.
answering and passing readiness checks.
Yes.
I was
Yes, it
like,
was.
nice.
Yeah, and I bet this is also helping our CPU utilization on startup as well, because like
Probably, yeah.
loading Rails is like was super CPU intensive, and this was causing a cascading effect with HBA where we would launch 20 pods and then the CPU would spike and then like launch some more, and it was just really bad. So yeah, this is awesome. So yeah, so I think we could go
There's
ahead.
also an issue in the GitLab project to reduce the time it takes for Rails itself to start up. And if improvements can be made there, we'll see those improvements here as well.
That's great.
Okay. So it sounds like for the next thing is to probably flesh out the urgent CPU bound epic. Skarbek, what do you want to work on? Like, or do you want to just try to like work in parallel together on urgent CPU bound, or there may
I
not
would
be
love
enough
to
work
work
there?
together, sir.
Well,
I don't have anything in particular that is interesting to me, so I'd be willing to pick up whatever you potentially don't want to pick up, probably, because I need to start getting back into gear, anyways.
okay. How about the annoying thing, which I did for the last two shards, which is to flesh out the epic issues.
Okay.
And because I don't want to do that, but
Sure, I could do that.
no, I mean, like, I think it's just a matter of like creating the node pool and the resource. We have to do another issue for like estimating the resource consumption
Yeah.
to figure out what we spec it out. So how about you take that?
So, oh, not Epic 256. Which Epic is that?
It's urgent CPU bound. It's the one it's 256, right? Oh no.
So, unless you have it linked incorrectly.
Yeah, I have it linked incorrectly. My bad. Like, I'm almost positive I just created. Yeah, here it is. Epic 262.
262. Okay. Yeah, I'll start filling that in and we'll go from there.
And in terms of this console agent support stuff, so we've already started on that. So
Yeah.
what's the benefit we get from that piece of work?
So before we migrate
Anything other than Sidekick.
anything other than Sidekick, we need to have console agent running in the cluster, because we use console DNS to figure out the database replica endpoints. And the reason why we didn't need this for Sidekick was because Sidekick only uses the primary database. So it only connects to one database endpoint, just the primary.
Right.
For everything else, they also have like internal load balancing where they connect to like a bunch of replicas. So we use console by doing a DNS lookup against console, which then returns a bunch of IP addresses that the application uses to load balance for all the database replicas.
I see. Okay.
Would this be something if we moved? This is me brainstorming. If PG Bouncer was to be moved to Kubernetes, would we need to add console to the cluster?
So keep in mind, this is for replicas where the PG Bouncer is local to the database, to the Patroni host, right?
Yeah.
Not the central PG Bouncer.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would help, right? Because you would still have PG Bouncer. So for some background for Amy, we have we use PG Bouncer as a database pooler, and we have a PG Bouncer for the primary, which is a standalone like PG Bouncer fleet. And then each replica also has a local PG Bouncer that is used as a connection pooler that's installed locally alongside of Postgres. And the PG Bouncer we need is that one. So I don't think that would help Skarbek, right?
I guess not. That's unfortunate.
But I think it'd be good to get this console thing running anyway. Like, who knows? We may be using console for more things.
Yeah, Ben has been talking about using it for various metric-related items for his team. So.
Right.
So yeah. it might be good. How about I work on that while you get started with the epic for the
Will do.
next shard, and
Will do.
we'll see. Maybe I'm probably not going to be able to demo something this Friday, but maybe the following Friday.
Great. That sounds great. And we've got quite a few of the sort of lower priority issues. If we could get them into issues and epics, as makes sense, that would be great. I'm particularly interested in that one, Scarbet, that you mentioned about the scaling based on metrics. Like, I think that's going to have some long-term, like, that's going to be really important at some point. So
That's going to benefit a lot of people, but it's going to require a lot of coordination with distribution, because we need to make sure that whatever solution we come up with is usable for self-managed installs plus our use at GitLab.com. So I think we're going to see the need to improve our charts before we're able to take advantage of it. Like Jason said, it's going to be a multi milestone situation. But yeah, I think all of us are thoroughly interested in seeing that.
great.
That sounds good. Maybe speaking of epics, maybe we should, like, we have the master epic here, and maybe we can do some cleanup.
Yeah, that would be super
Like,
helpful.
like Kubernetes post-migration technical debt. I don't know. Do you think we should keep this epic, Scarbeck? It looks like there's a lot of good issues here that
I think
want
we
to
at
keep track
least
of.
need to roll through all of these to figure out what we should do soon versus what we could kick.
Yeah, I agree with
Because I
that.
haven't looked at that in a while, so I don't know even what's in there.
Okay, so Amy, I'll try to organize this a bit more, and maybe the next time we meet, we can just kind of go over the master epic in detail and make sure everything is, you know, everything's up to date and
That
organized.
would be great. Yeah, that would be super helpful.
Cool.
I don't know
Cool.
if we want to do looking through that during the demo or not, but it's an option.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Let's do it during the demo.
Okay.
Refine that epic or whatever.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, that
Cool.
sounds great. Excellent.
Cool.
Anything else we need to cover off today?
No, I think I'm good.
Amazing. Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Great day. Take care.
Have
Bye.
a good one.
Ciao. Bye.